The Gym Challenge. The air in the gym was thick with the smell of sweat and old leather from punching bags. The walls echoed with the rhythmic sound of punches and the shuffling of feet on the mat, as fighters of different styles trained without rushing. Among them, a professional boxer, known for his arrogance and quick hands, observed with disdain the martial arts practitioners who passed by. "These guys don't really know how to fight," he muttered to his trainer, pointing to a group of kung fu students who were practicing high kicks and fluid movements. "In the ring, all that matters is the punch. The rest is a waste of time." The trainer, a man of few words, merely nodded, but his eyes fixed on a figure moving with lethal precision in the corner of the room. Bruce Lee, with his slender frame and relaxed posture, looked more like a dancer than a fighter. His movements were economical, almost lazy, but each gesture carried a clear intention. "That one over there," said the boxer, laughing. "It looks like it's going to break if I punch it." Bruce, who had noticed the sneer, stopped his training and approached with a calm smile. There was no anger on his face, just curiosity. "Do you think boxing is superior?" he asked, his voice calm, almost friendly. "That only a punch can solve everything?" The boxer crossed his arms, filled with confidence. "I don't think so, I know. Martial art is beautiful to look at, but in the end it is just that, beautiful. In the ring, the fist is the boss." Bruce didn't argue. He just tilted his head, as if considering the words. "Then show me," he said, extending his hand. "Come here. Hit me." The boxer hesitated for a second, but the provocation was too much. He came forward, gloves raised, body tilted slightly forward, ready to deliver a straight right. Bruce remained still, his arms at his sides, his eyes fixed on his opponent's. "Closer," he murmured. The boxer smiled, thinking it was fear. He took another step, closing the distance. Then, in the blink of an eye, everything changed. Bruce moved before the punch was thrown. A sidestep, a tiny hip turn, and his right hand shot out like a snake. It wasn't a strong punch, nor a spectacular blow, it was a touch. A finger extended, pressing with surgical precision a point below the boxer's rib. The man felt a sharp pain, as if lightning had passed through his body. His knees gave way, and he fell to the floor, panting, eyes wide with disbelief. There was no blood, no bruising, just a pain that seemed to come from within, as if something had ruptured in his nervous system. Bruce crouched down beside him, his expression serene. "The problem isn't boxing," he said, gently helping him to his feet. "It's thinking that only what you know works. The ring is small, but the world is big. And in it, the strongest doesn't always win, sometimes, just the smartest." The boxer, still stunned, did not respond. But, in the days that followed, he began to train with more humility, and to watch, carefully, the movements of those martial artists he previously despised. The awakening. The following days were a slow deconstruction. The boxer, who previously only responded to the name Thunder on the fight posters, began to observe the other athletes in the gym with a new look. It was no longer contempt that moved him, but an avid, almost hungry curiosity. He saw the judoka throw an opponent twice his size with a simple turn of his hips. Muay Thai, with its circular kicks, made the punching bag swing as if it were made of paper. And jiu-jitsu, oh, jiu-jitsu was something else. Smaller, lighter men immobilized opponents as if they were dolls, using only levers and pressure. "You look like a dog looking at someone else's plate," said Bruce one afternoon, while Thunder was watching a wrestling practice. "I'm just trying to understand," he murmured, without looking away. "Understand what?" "How they do that. How a guy weighing 60 pounds holds a guy weighing 100 to the ground and doesn't even let him breathe." Bruce smiled, crossing his arms. "Because they don't fight against force. They use her." Thunder frowned. "Like this? If you push a strong man, he pushes back. If you pull, it resists. But if you pretend to push and, at the last second, pull," Bruce made a quick movement with his hands, as if dodging an invisible blow. He falls alone. Thunder didn't say anything, but that night, in his tiny apartment, he stayed up late, mentally replaying every movement he had seen. The next day, he asked to train with one of the jiu-jitsu black belts. "Are you sure?" asked the instructor, a middle-aged Japanese man with scars on his knuckles. "Boxing and jiu-jitsu don't mix well." "I just want to learn," said Thunder, taking off his gloves. The first training was humiliating. He tried to use his brute strength, his quick punches, but the black belt knocked him down with a simple haraigashi, a sweep that made him fall backwards onto the mat. He tried to get up, but the man had him in a headlock before he could blink. Thunder hit the ground, signaling his withdrawal, and the instructor released him with a respectful wave. "You fight as if the ground were your enemy," said the Japanese. "But the ground is your ally. Learn to fall." Thunder spent weeks being beaten. Every fall, every pin, every armbar that forced him to the mat was a reminder of how little he knew. But, little by little, something changed. He began to anticipate movements, to feel his opponent's weight, to use his own momentum against him. It was no longer about strength. It was about fluidity, about giving in and then dominating. The fight. 6 months later, Treveo received an invitation to a free-for-all fight in a clandestine warehouse on the outskirts of the city. The opponent was a former MMA fighter, a man known for breaking bones with his low kicks. The public, a crowd of gamblers and drunks, screamed for blood. "You don't have to do this," Bruce said, as Thunder wrapped his hands in bandages. "I know. This guy already broke 3 of a guy's ribs in the first round." Thunder finished rolling up the sash and looked at the mirror. His face was thinner, his eyes more attentive. There was no longer the arrogance there was before. "I've also broken ribs," he said, putting on his gloves. "But today I'm going to do something different." The gong sounded. The ex-MMA man advanced like a bull, throwing a straight shot that Treveo deflected with a sidestep. The low kick came next, but he jumped, letting the blow go under. The audience booed, thinking he was scared. But Thunder wasn't running away. "I was waiting." The opponent tried a clinch, grabbing him by the neck. Thunder couldn't resist. He let the man pull him close, as if it were a hug. Then, in a quick movement, he rotated his hip and threw his opponent over his shoulder, using his own strength against him. The former MMA fighter landed on his back with a thud. The audience fell silent. Thunder didn't jump on him. He didn't try to punch him to the ground. Instead, he knelt down and grabbed his opponent's arm, applying a shoulder lock. The man screamed, struggling, but Thunder kept the pressure on. A dry crack. The arm was broken. The referee stopped the fight. The new path. Thunder never became the same boxer again. He didn't abandon the ring, but started training in martial arts, studying the human body, understanding that fighting wasn't just about hitting, but about not being beaten. He won some fights, lost others, but in all of them he learned something. Years later, when he was already a respected veteran on the circuit, an arrogant young boxer challenged him to a fight. The boy had quick hands and a devastating left hook. "You're going to get beaten, old man," said the boy, laughing. Thunder smiled, remembering himself years ago. "Maybe," he said. "But I won't fall." And when the gong sounded, he didn't fall at all. The last round. The fight started with the young man firing quick jabs, testing Treveo's defense. The veteran moved with economy, blocking blows with his forearms, breathing deeply. The public screamed, eager for the spectacle of blood that the challenger promised. In the second round, the boy went on the attack. A left hook landed on Treveo's chin, making his head spin. For an instant he saw stars, but his feet remained firm. The young man smiled, confident, and went in for the knockout. It was then that Thunder remembered Muay. Not from the scream, not from the breaking bone, but from the lesson he carried since that night: pain is temporary, but the fall is eternal. He ducked, dodging a direct shot, and counterattacked with a roundhouse kick that hit his opponent's ribs. The boy staggered, surprised. Nobody expected a boxer to use legs. "What is that?" growled the young man, recovering. "Fight," replied Thunder, calmly. The following rounds were a dance of strategy. Treveo wasn't looking for the knockout, he studied the opponent's patterns, exploited their weaknesses. When the boy tried to get closer, he kept him at bay with front kicks. When the young man retreated, Thunder advanced with precise punches, never wasting energy. By the 7th round, the challenger was exhausted. His blows lost strength, his breathing became heavy. Thunder, on the other hand, seemed untouched. He knew that fatigue was an experienced fighter's greatest weapon. "You're not as fast as you think," said Thunder, blocking a weak punch. The boy spat out the mouthguard, his eyes burning with anger. "Shut up." Thunder didn't respond. Instead, he waited. The young man launched one last desperate attack, a right cross that, if successful, could decide the fight. But Thunder had seen that movement before. He dodged with a turn of his body and, on the counterattack, applied a side kick that hit his opponent's knee. The snap was dry. The boy fell to the ground, clutching his leg, his face contorted in pain. The referee stopped the fight. Thunder did not celebrate. He just took a deep breath, feeling the weight of the years on his shoulders. In the locker room, while wrapping his hands in bandages, the young man entered, limping. His pride was hurt, but not his curiosity. "How did you do that?" he asked. Thunder finished curling his fingers and looked at him. "You fought angrily." "I fought patiently." The boy frowned, as if the words didn't make sense. "But I hit you. You bled." "Bleeding is not falling," said Thunder, getting up. "And falling is not losing. Losing is not learning." The young man remained silent, absorbing the lesson. When Treveo left the locker room, the boy was still there, looking at his own reflection in the mirror, as if he saw something new. Epilogue. Thunder never went into the ring again. Not out of fear, nor out of tiredness, but because I had already said everything I needed to say with my fists. He opened a small gym, where he taught not just strikes, but control, respect, and the art of standing. Years later, an undefeated fighter, known for his impeccable technique and coolness in combat, appeared in an interview. When asked who had inspired him, he cited a name that few recognized. "Thunder," he said, with a smile. "He taught me that the real fight begins when you stop trying to win and start trying not to be defeated." And so, without ever being champion, Treveo became a legend. The last round. The years passed, and the Thunder Academy grew, not in size, but in reputation. It was not a place for those seeking fame or money, but for those who understood that struggle was a metaphor for life. Among the students, some stood out. There was the young man who had arrived with shaking hands, unable to look anyone in the eye, and now taught self-defense to women in shelters. The girl who had been expelled from 3 schools for fighting and now ran discipline workshops for teenagers. And, of course, there was him. The boy in the mirror. His name was Daniel, but everyone called him Shadow, because, in the first few months, he moved like a ghost around the corners of the gym, avoiding contact, observing everything with eyes that seemed to hold too many secrets for such a thin body. Thunder had let him train for free, no questions asked. He knew a burning soul when he saw one. Over time, Sombra revealed himself to be a natural talent. He didn't have the brute strength of Treveo in his ring days, but he had a surgical precision, a timing that made his blows look like dancing. And, above all, he was hungry. Not the hunger to win, but the hunger to survive, to prove to himself that he wasn't what the world said he was. "You have technique," Thunder said one night, after an exhausting session. "But technique without purpose is just choreography." Sombra didn't respond. He just wrapped the bands around his hands with quick movements, as if each turn was a ritual. "One day, you will have to decide if you want to be a fighter or a survivor." "What's the difference?" Sombra's voice was low, almost swallowed by the sound of the swinging punching bags. Thunder smiled tiredly. A fighter seeks victory. A survivor searches for the next dawn. Sombra didn't understand at the time. But he understood years later, when he was already a respected name on the professional circuit, when he already had belts hanging on the wall of his apartment and a crescent-shaped scar above his left eyebrow, a reminder of a fight in which he had almost lost everything. The first time Sombra returned to the gym after turning pro, it was as if time had stopped. The smell of sweat and leather, the creaking of the ring ropes, the muffled sound of the bags being hit, everything was the same. Thunder, however, was different. Gray hair was now the majority, and the hands, once as fast as lightning, moved with the caution of someone who no longer trusted their own reflexes so much. "I heard you won again," Thunder said, without looking at him, as he adjusted the gloves of a beginning student. "It was a dirty fight," Sombra replied, leaning against the doorframe. "The guy hit me after the bell." "And you fought back?" Sombra hesitated. "No." Thunder nodded, as if that was the answer he was waiting for. "Then you already know the difference." The conflict came when Sombra was challenged by the current light heavyweight champion, a man named Viktor the Hammer Volkov. It wasn't just a title fight, it was a personal war. Volkov had been responsible for Sombra's scar years earlier in an unofficial fight in an abandoned warehouse. At the time, Sombra was just a boy trying to prove something to himself. Volkov, a cruel veteran, had broken it just for fun. The press loved the narrative, the prodigy versus the villain, technique versus brutality, redemption versus revenge. Sombra trained like never before, but in the days leading up to the fight, he began to have nightmares. These were not dreams of defeat, but of victory. With the moment when he would finally have Volkov at his feet, begging for mercy. With the taste of the other's blood in your mouth. The day before the fight, he went to the Treveo Academy. "I don't know if I can do it," he confessed, sitting on the floor of the locker room, his back against the wall. "I don't know if I want to win or just want to hurt him." Thunder didn't say anything for a long time. Then she sat down next to him, her knuckles cracking slightly. "When I was your age, I fought a man who hated me. Not because of the ring, but because of something that happened outside of it. I wanted to break it. And I almost made it." He took a deep breath. "In the end, he wasn't the one who broke it. It was me." Sombra looked at his hands, imagining them covered in blood. "How did you know you had stopped fighting and started hating?" "When I realized I was rooting for him to fall and not get up again." The fight was a spectacle of calculated violence. Volkov charged into the octagon like a bull, knocking down everything in his path. Sombra, however, moved like water, dodging, counterattacking, using his opponent's own anger against him. By the third round, Volkov was exhausted, his eyes bloodshot with hatred. That was when Sombra cornered him against the fence and delivered a sequence of blows that left him staggering. It was at that moment that Sombra saw it. It wasn't Volkov there, in front of him. It was his own reflection in the mirror, years before. The scared boy, full of invisible scars, fighting to not be swallowed by the world. And, suddenly, he understood what Thunder had wanted to say all those years. He lowered his arms. Volkov, confused, hesitated. Then, with a roar, he charged in for the final blow. Sombra dodged, but didn't fight back. He let the other hit him, felt the impact reverberate through his body, and fell. The audience booed. The press screamed betrayal. Volkov raised his arms in victory, while Sombra slowly stood up, blood running from the corner of his mouth. In the locker room, later, Treveo was waiting for him. "You lost," he said, without judgment. "No," Sombra replied, touching his cut lip. "I won." Years later, Sombra retired undefeated. Not in victories, but in something more important, in not letting yourself be overcome by hatred. He opened his own gym, smaller than the one in Treveo, but with the same spirit. And one night, when a skinny, scared boy appeared at the door, Looking at his reflection in the mirror as if he saw something new, Sombra smiled. "Come in," he said. "Let's get started."